Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, Earth families, and welcome to this, our fourth press conference of the Ohio Jure Assembly. In this press conference, we are going to be engaging you with some information about the key integrated monetary system. Okay. Basically, we want to go and get started with this right away so that we can share with you. This is what we believe is very important information as messenger of the Charter Ohio Jure Assembly. My name is Eliharu Stanley, XI. And we want to get right into it to discuss the key integrated monetary system, KIMS, in relation to the Charter Assembly, Ohio Jure Assembly, its proposals, its projects and programs. And we also want to remind everyone that there is a meeting happening actually tomorrow for the United States Assemblies on February 5th. And I believe that meeting is at 5 o'clock. I'll give you a little bit more detail about that probably at the end so that you can see this for those who are interested in that. But that being said, let's get right into this. Let's go back to our website. This is our website, the website for IAPA Charter, Ohio Jure Assembly. And it is located at iapacharterage.wordpress.com. And information, what we'll do, what we're trying to do there is post pertinent information to members of the Ohio Jure Assembly, which is every man, woman, and child who lives in the state of Ohio. And also members of the world, the earth in general, what we call the 99% people who are out here struggling, even if the struggle was not known to them, or fighting or at war with the deep state, the order, and we did talk about a lot of this. I didn't mean to do that. Let's see. We did talk about a lot of this in previous videos that we uploaded. The first video we uploaded, it really got into detail about some of it. And the second video we uploaded of the second press conference, it got in detail about some of the laws. We will be uploading a third video today along with this one. And in the third video, we kind of went through what the People's Government Service Department is and what are the components of assemblies, the lawful component, as well as the operational component, and what that meant. We showed you where you can find information about that. And then you can go there and look at it and so forth and so on. So this is our website again. You can visit our website at the address we read. And this is basically what our mission is. It's a declaration of self-governance, or idioism, which is a word that the Guardian kind of created, I think, on the fly, but idio means self-governing. And so what we're about is manifesting the truth for disclosure and for employment or empowerment to the people of the planet, for restoration, planetary restoration, to all the natural sovereigns, spirituality, identity, history, restoration of their spirituality, their history, their identity, their religions and cultures and rituals and practices. You know, all these things that were here before that somehow got absorbed and swallowed up in this whole corporate matrix where everybody has been, well, first of all, they wanted everybody to look alike and dress alike and walk and talk alike. And then, you know, eventually once that whole thing broke down, you have all this, everybody's got their own little personal brand and personal identity. But it all seems somehow peculiar because everybody's personal identity is just a version of some eclectic, you know, identity that everybody has. Everybody's a little different, but everybody has their own little brands and labels. And sometimes they wear the brands and labels of other entities, which are elite entities, on their own bodies in the form of tattoos and so forth and so on. And they don't even know it. You know, the younger generation has basically been bamboozled, brainwashed, duped, and made to believe that they are special, you know, only because they, you know, have been brainwashed. Basically, I'm not trying to belittle the ideal, you know, but you know, they're not really that special because if everybody's kind of doing the version, another version of the same thing, then what makes you special? You know, if you're not unique and creative. You know, there was a time when there was a lot of diversity and creativeness and cultures, just every area. You had people doing all their stuff by hand. They made their clothes. They created their own little cultural identities, the little tribal things. I'm not saying that tribalism is, you know, the best thing for us, you know, because tribalism is also what the deep state and the rulers of darkness use to divide us. But there are also aspects of tribalism and family that are very unique. And when you see the way the old cultures looked and how they dressed in each area, they had so many different things that were so unique. It's still like that in places like in Africa, isolated areas, you know, where people have their own beautiful customs and clothing and design, but this was going on all over the world at one time. Now everybody wears either jeans and t-shirts or suits and ties, and everybody, you know, kind of like either you're conservative or you're liberal, or you're this, you're that. You got all these different labels, and it's totally not anything like what it was before. So basically what we're going to talk about today is this. This is the key integrated monetary system. And the reason why we all as people need to understand this and understand what it is and why it is because read here and you'll get a concept of why this is real important. The global repository holds the assets of the entire planet. And due to recently expired contracts, treaties, and covenants, the transition of power, which for years has been taking place behind the scene, has been completed. These assets represent the collective wealth of the entire globe and include the most valuable treasures gathered throughout history. Okay, due to the failure of previous guardians to act in the best interest of the people and of the planet, the director of the GIA, the Global Intelligence Agency, Kimberly Ann Gogan, was appointed in 2012. Kim is the author of the Global Restoration Plan, designed to replace the United Nations and its attempt at global Holocaust. So we have this going on. What I want to do for a second, though, is put a pause on our video, because it looks like I'm kind of running out of power and I need to get some power. How's it going? So we're back. And like I said, if it ain't one thing, it's another. You know, we're trying to get this information to you. And, you know, we've been trying to do this for days. And we're always having these tiny little setbacks. So I'm going to read the second paragraph again. Due to the failure of the previous guardians to act in the best interest of the people on the planet, the director of the GIA, Kimberly Ann Gogan, was appointed in 2012. Kim is the author of the Global Restoration Plan, designed to replace the United Nations and its attempt at global Holocaust. Okay, so Kimberly Ann Gogan was appointed, as you see here, in 2012. This is really important to understand because, you know, we as people, especially the ones who live in the United States, if we reflect back to that time period, 2007, 2012 to 2008 and 2012, that's when Obama became president. And some of y'all may or may not remember this, but there was a financial collapse, you know, and I want to go into a little of that so that you can get an understanding of why this whole thing occurred. Let me see if I can find we have presentations that we do on this stuff. And I'm gonna see if I can find one I can open up. Yeah. Just to kind of give you a brief overview of what this whole thing is all about. Okay, so I want to go up here and read. This is, you know, a presentation that we do during some of our public depositions, you know, to kind of explain to the people, you know, that money has changed and why it has changed. And like I said earlier, some of you all may remember the collapse of the financial system in 2008, just when Obama became president. Bush II, George W. was going out. The whole thing was beginning to collapse, and there were certain companies that were in the epicenter of all this. And loaning institutions. One was called Freddie Mac, one was called Fannie Mae. I think you had the Lieberman brothers, and which I think was some kind of insurance company, but all these things began to, burst, in bubbles, and they began to burst, and the whole financial system was collapsing. And the reason for it actually was that the contracts that were made with the previous guardian, the one who preceded Kimberly Guggen, had been honoring these contracts for about 100 years. And all this stuff, just like corporations, they begin to expire. We want to go into a little bit about this right here so that you can see what this is. Many changes and dynamic changes have occurred this year, and in the month of July, especially witnessing some of the important things we have witnessed over the centuries. Yet only a small few and even aware of what has already happened. So before I can bring you up to this minute, we need to share a little backstory. What had happened in the 20th century that put the whole world on a course, which has brought it to global shutdown, economic collapse, and what we call martial law, the pandemic, and so forth and so on. It has all really been about currency and who controls the flow of money. Most of us have heard of the Federal Reserve, the creature of Jekyll Island. That is a private corporation formed on an island on December 23rd, 1913 by an elite group of monarchs and millionaires like the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Carnegies, and even US President Wilson, to be the custodians of the global monetary system. Their purpose for the meeting was to do to the whole world what they had already been doing to indigenous Aboriginal people everywhere, which is to take control of all the world's resources and either kill or enslave the rest of humanity. This plan began with the ratification by the US Congress of the Federal Reserve as the custodian of the United States Treasury. As custodian, it became the issuer of bonds and the printer of currency, that is the US dollar, which is a Federal Reserve note. Now, again, that happened in 1913. All corporations have a 99-year lifespan unless they are renewed after 99 years. So if you add 1913, 99 to it, what does that come up with? 2012. Bingo, you see? So that's where we see Kimberly Ann Guggen stepping in at the end of a 99-year contract. Now, their contract, what they did in those 99 years is created what we call and what economists call, what we learned in Econ 101 as the war boom bust economy. The war boom bust model is how the Fed controls the use of currency to control the destiny of nations, people, ethnic groups by locking all into a most vicious matrix, a life and death cycle of control. This model, which is based on war, assumes that war generates economic activities because it promotes industrial innovation, especially military innovation. This model is responsible for what we call the Industrial Revolution, the post-industrial, and the post-industrial age. Its growth and expansion in the 20th century. According to this model, war produces innovation, innovation produces jobs, i.e. the booming economy, and the boom promotes inflation through the money magic derivative system, which leads to a bust, and the bust, AKA, is recessions or depressions. Were to escape it, another war is needed, so it brings in a new cycle. The first cycle from 1913, the Fed banksters, after they took control through, the Congress ratifying them, of the dying Ottoman Empire, got World War I started. And the USA Incorporated got involved, and that involvement generated a booming economy. We've been in the United States, they were building ships, supplying armory, guns, weapons, and all that. So that created a roaring market, a bull market, which is ensured what they call the Roaring '20s, and it was also followed by an inflation bubble and a crash in 1928 to 29. The crash brought on the bust, also known as the Great Depression, because the Fed was given custodialship over everyone's money under the new laws. Anyone who had money or precious metals in the banks, these people's wealth was confiscated. So then, we had, the history says that, all these people who were rich and then are suddenly poor, they begin to jump out of windows, commit suicide and all that. The gold and silver that they held personally was also taken by the new laws. They tried to make it so that no one could own or hold gold. Only the Federal Reserve and the US Treasury could hold and own gold. And so again, the suicide rates rose. FDR gave the people a new deal. That new deal was a contract. Of course, see, the contract was with the new Federal Reserve, okay, because the United States government needed to be bailed out. It was busted, it was broke. And so, but they didn't have any gold, they didn't have any collateral. So what the contract was they said, well, we'll put the people themselves, the American people, the souls of men, and use them as the collateral, for the payment to the Fed for the loan that they had gotten from the Fed, the loan to rebuild the country, okay? And they call that the New Deal. As it translates to us, it was known as the Social Security Administration, SA. So everybody got a Social Security number. But what that really meant is that you as a person was now the subordinate or the custody of the state, the federal state, or the federal government, and your body and soul was being used as collateral in exchange for what they call the 40-40-40 rule. 40 hours a week for 40 years. And then you get, I guess, if you're lucky, a gold or gold-plated watch and a Social Security, Social Security check, when you get old. At the age of, I think at that time it was maybe 62 or 65, now it's 67. And then you can get a check for the rest of your life based upon all the money that you have put into the system. And withdraw from your checks and anything else, your income anyway. So they had a very nice setup where the Federal Reserve and the IRS, they come in, take your money, you know, take your labor, you become basically what they called in older times sharecroppers, but this is kind of like a high-tech form of sharecropping. And they put you in a situation where now you were the collateral for the United States, which means that you were no longer a sovereign being, but you are a property. You know, you are a slave. So again, like I said, they did to all American people what they have been doing to the indigenous Aboriginal people of the land, you know, for more than a century. Okay, so, you know, so what this is talking about, the New Deal essentially offered up the people as collateral to get recovery to save the nation's economy in exchange for their souls. The people were promised Social Security and the 40/40 retirement plan. Okay, so let's go to the next thing. The next episode dealt with, it began with World War II, the Korean War, the Cold War, Vietnam War, decolonization of Africa and third world countries, formation of new organizations like the UN, the Organization of African Unity, African American Unity, Civil Rights Movement was all a part of, the anti-apartheid movement was all a part of this new episode. The Black Power Revolution was a part of this new episode. And the two presidents, Dwight D. Eisenhower and JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, when they became aware of the stakes of what was really going on, what the deep state was doing, their oath to the people, they used their oath to the people to warn the people of the growing secret power of the deep state. Now, there is probably online you can get these speeches. Eisenhower talked about the military industrial complex, and that the people need to be aware of it and that it was growing. And then, of course, John F. Kennedy, he was going to go up against it as well, and they blew his brains out. So this is just history you need to be aware of, you know, and they served at that, the deep state agents' agenda to keep American people in general enslaved, and Apple communities impoverished, enslaved, imprisoned, or dead. Using counterintelligence programs and programs such as the war on drugs to cover up their actual agenda, to keep us all divided and conquered. What I now have come to learn is that through information made available through the Global Intelligence Agency, is that the last president, Donald J. Trump, and his four predecessors were all members of this order, the Order of the Black Sun, and this elite echelon of deep state global criminal mafias, was headed by old Poppy Bush himself, or George H.W. Bush. But according to some, now Donald Trump is the head of all this. The saga continues. With the New Deal, the American people became collateral, as I said, to a loan agreement under law between the Federal Reserve and the USA Incorporated. And the gold standard was pegged from the note, their note, the Federal Reserve note, which is the US dollar. In 1945, at the Brentwood Conference, The dollar was made the global standard by which all other currencies were measured. Now, what happened there, I just want to kind of elaborate a little bit on that, is that after World War II, the whole of Europe was destroyed. All the infrastructure was destroyed through the bombing that, of course, the US and the deep state, the Rothschilds and all those other people, the Bush families, had engineered and organized, through supplying both sides with weapons of war and destruction. After they destroyed that, they had to rebuild it. And so the rebuilding process began with making the US dollar the international currency. So they began to dump dollars into all these countries to rebuild these countries. Okay, so at the same time, they depegged the gold standard from the US dollar. So you could no longer go into the bank and get gold for dollars. Then in 1972, under the Nixon administration, the dollar was depegged from the silver because, you could still go in there and get silver for it. But then they took in 1972 and it remained an international standard with a floating value because of the OPEC deal, which was negotiated by then Secretary Henry Kissinger, who was also a member of the Trilateral Commission. I won't go into too much of that right now, but this is dealing with that all the currency of all nations had to hold a certain amount of US dollars in their treasury because they needed to buy oil from the Saudi Arabia or United Arab Republic and all the OPEC, what they call the OPEC nations that include places like Nigeria, areas that had Iran and Iraq and places like that that had oil. So they all needed the dollar. So that way the US dollar became more and more powerful in this world. Now, that's what created what we call, or what they call, the money magic system. Briefly, the money magic system is all about the Benjamins, that little piece of paper that holds a lot of weight. Everybody joins the rat race, and oh, what a rat race it is. The dollar of today is only worth 5% of what it was worth in 1972 when they started this thing out. How did we get here? We got here by a system they have been using since then, better known as derivatives. Derivatives simply means that something derives from something else. And in the case of the dollar, a little piece of paper that carries a lot of weight, its real value is derived from its use, as it is an international medium of exchange because of the decisions to peg the oil and other commodities to it, by the Fed, and because of the world's popular belief in it. And because of that belief, the Fed and the World Bank and the banksters who run them were able, through using printing presses, were able to create money, AKA, or the perception of value, out of thin air. And this is what is called the money magic system. In other words, money, or the paper, is nothing but a printed sheet of, like a paper, which is, got a lot of cotton in it and everything else. But that's what it is. And it's derived, mostly, it's the result of perception. It has no real actual value. And basically what it means is that at one time, like I said, a long time ago, when the Fed first started, you could go into the bank, the Federal Reserve, and exchange your Federal Reserve note for real currency, which is gold, real gold and stuff. So for example, you go into the bank, you had actual $100 Fed note, and you could get $100 worth of gold. But after this, what they did was held whatever the real value of it was. And when you brought it into any of the banks, what the banks would do also was create loans, which is of 10 times the value of what they had in deposit. In other words, they would, if you went into the bank and deposited a real value of $100, the bank would ledger against that and make 10 loans to 10 people of $100. Okay, so now you got $100 representing $1,100, but that $1,000 was nothing but a paper agreement given to you by the bank, which was not a collateral. It was not, the bank put up no collateral. They just created money out of thin air. Their collateral could come up in a couple of weeks and they could take custody of whatever you worked and paid for. There was a case that, on the internet, they talk about the Nazara and Jazara Act, the National, National Economic Reform and Security Act, where this case went to where they were taking farmers' lands and all that, because the bank said that they had loaned them money, but they proved that the bank hadn't loaned them anything because they didn't put up no collateral. The farmer had collateral because his land was collateral, his produce was collateral. All the stuff that you as a real member of the planet Earth, as a human being, what you put up, just the same thing happened when the Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae escapade. People going in and putting their hard-earned dollars that they gained through labor up, against, as a deposit on these houses. And then the bank would come in with these balloon mortgages, and they started them out at a real low rate. And then as soon as they get into it, about a year later, they might have started them out at $1,200 a month mortgage. And then a year later, that mortgage jumps up to $2,400 because the banks wants them to bring this money in. And then that's how the whole system began to collapse in 2007, 2008. You see, because the reality is that no real money was being put on the table with no real value in the deal by the banks. So they could, by law, take anything you own, even throw you into a in jail, debtor's prison, and leave you there when you would have no recourse to defend yourself or to recover your assets. And this is what happened. One of the examples of this is the COVID pandemic. This was a real financial collapse in 2007, 2008, as we talked about, the bankruptcy of the Lieberman brothers, the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, aka subprime mortgages, where the working class, especially indigenous Aboriginal people, were blamed for the economic collapse. The Fed dodged the bullet thanks to the magnificent smile and the tap dancing of Barack Obama, aka the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And that's why some of us some circles he's called, in some circles he's called a magic Negro. So basically, since then, this country has been running on fumes. And, you know, without a renewed contract, things were not going to ever return. Again, like I said, that renewed contract had to come, you know, to the Fed, which their contract expired in 2012. And it had to be renewed in order for them to get money released from the global repository. But the new guardian, the new interim president, Kimberly Gogan, who became that person, decided not to do that. Instead, what her decision was to allow the people themselves and set up a condition and environment where the people, we the people, could have and make contracts with the global repository ourselves to meet the conditions and needs that we, you know, had. So basically, all of this is just to give you some background on what the global, what they call key integrated monetary system is. That's a little backstory. Hopefully you were able to get a little bit more information, the backstory of the Fed, the Federal Reserve, and the Corporation of the United States of America, how they were all in there trying to trick and maneuver and manipulate themselves and, you know, into a place where they owned everything and the people owned nothing. That agenda is still in force, in play. That's why we still have the pandemic going on, even though now, just recently, the U.S. Supreme Court slapped down these mandates that you had to have vaccines. And, you know, it's very interesting that these vaccines are not really vaccines. I'm not going to go into any of that here, but there's a lot of information that you can find on, for example, the United News Network. As a matter of fact, I think just yesterday, there was a Live at 5 program that was released, and it was talked about then. I'm gonna go to the United News Network to let you see that. And you can do this yourself, but yesterday, on the 3rd of February, Stephen Rao, who is also the Deputy Director of the GIA, the Global Intelligence Agency, he reported on this. And you can go to that website and look at it. What we're going to try to do too is see if we can't create links on our web page so that you can see it from our web page or get to it from our web page. I'm not sure if we can do that right now because there's a membership fee involved, but we'll test it and see. Maybe you can see some of these things. This is also a report that you want to look at. This report of Kimberly Ann Gogan that was done on the 25th of January, where she talks about the expiration of these contracts. So that's a real important thing to know. And then there's also many other, you know, channels and videos that you can find on here. And every week, Life Force has a weekly meeting. The last one was on the 1st of February. This one is important. one that I really want everybody to look at is this one that happened on the 11th, on November 30th, 11/30, because I talked about this in one of the previous videos. You know, people, you know, will have doubts about all this because it's so fantastic, so unbelievable, some of the stuff that she shares with us. And I took and basically, you know, gave you reasons, my own reasons why I believe it, you know, because of my own clairaudient and experience with the what I now know the NSA in a deep state, you know, on a personal level for the last 34 years, which of course she helped to reveal to me who these guys were just by the activities that she was doing, and you know, the activities that they were discussing on my channel, because we all have a direct channel to, you know, the source. And some of our channels are clear, which allows, you know, other people who understand the technology greater access to things. And, you know, they've been able to access a lot through my channel for 34 years, which I just now coming to terms and learning about, you know, with this whole idea of how they use our loosh and, you know, the adrenochrome and stuff like that to access, you know, the multiverse and different aspects of it and different aspects of the technology, because some of these technologies are fueled by the energy that human beings, you know, give off. Very much like what you see in the movies like The Matrix and so forth and so on. But I'm not going to get into any of that right now. These are all stories for other days. But I just wanted to kind of like give you an overview, a sense of what has really been going on. And with that, we're going to end this fourth press conference, and I will see you on the other side. Peace.